So a very, very warm welcome to Pam England. I'm not going to say too much right at the beginning. I'll let Pam talk for herself as I ask her various questions. But I love the work that Pam is doing at the moment all around birth story medicine. It's deep work, it's fascinating. So I can't wait to hear about how you got there. But I'd like to just start with, where are you in the world? What's the weather like today?
Oh, well, I'm in Wimberley, Texas, on a beautiful creek, and the weather is kind of cloudy and cool at the moment, although it's supposed to be 102 this afternoon.
Well, we're in the middle of a heat wave here, so it's super hot for the UK, super hot. Yeah. And let's dive straight in, because I would love to hear, what were you like as a girl?
Well, as a young girl, you were asking me about being around 10, but even probably after that, I was incredibly shy and even scared. I was in a parochial school, so I was scared of the nuns and scared of bullies and scared of the ruler and things like that. But I was, I would say, fairly withdrawn. So I would go into daydreaming, and I did a lot of reading, and I was sketching a lot. So I was becoming an artist and a writer without even knowing it at the time. For a long time, I would say I was a wallflower, and I was trying to think of what's the smallest flower you could be to be on a wallflower, because that would have been me. And it's hard to believe now because I've opened past that. But I never would have expected my life to be one of openly teaching and being openly creative and having so many people to connect with in my life, because it didn't happen when I was very young.
It sounds like it was a place of escapism, to be able to read and go off somewhere, or to draw. And
yeah, definitely was. Yeah.
So was that encouraged, or was that in your household and at school, or was that something that was frowned upon?
No, at home, reading was always encouraged. And I think anything that kept me quiet, out of sight and out of mind of my single mom is very good. So drawing in my room for hours was very good. It was very, she would buy me art things to help me do it. But back then, we didn't even have a TV or any of the kinds of distractions that people have nowadays. So it was much easier to do it, and probably much more common.
And so as you got older, did you start to like school, or was it somewhere that you were still afraid of?
Well, I liked learning, but school was always hard for me because I was very introverted and awkward, and I was very skinny, and didn't have a lot of friends. I couldn't quite connect, so it was always hard for me. In fact, I thought I was really smart. And when my mom sent me my report card some years ago, I looked them over just for fun. And I was like, oh my God, I was not smart. Obviously, according to the school system. And I had quite a few C's, and I had a C in art. And I said, how could you get a C in art? But I did. And I said, well, I'm glad I didn't know it, because I went on to become quite creative with my art. So school was always hard, but when I got to nursing school, it became really interesting to me because it was like grown-up school, and became really interesting. And midwifery school became really interesting to me. And getting my master's degree was even, was at a higher and higher level. And the higher I went, the better, the more I enjoyed school. And I couldn't get, and now I'm a self-made student. I study all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, was nursing one of the few choices open to you? How come what made you go in that direction?
There was only one reason. I could be a nun, I could be a teacher, or I could be a nurse in those days. Now I'm 70 years old, so nearly 70. So that was all that was available. Now may have been some girls going to regular college, but we were very poor. We were on welfare, so this wasn't even an option for us. So those were the three choices, and I thought, well, I'll be a nurse. But I didn't, I liked studying nursing. But when I was actually doing the nurse work, I was good at it. I was kind, and nursing was different then than it is now. Also, much more technical now. Before it was much more service oriented. Much easier. But that wasn't really my goal, because when I was in midwifery, when I was in nursing school, I was only about 19. I don't even know if I hit 20 yet. And I was in my obstetric rotation. We had 10-week rotations to learn surgical or psychiatric, and obstetrics or birth was one of them. And now something happens. Now I'm awakened. It's almost like my destiny and fate have come together. And I see the same time I'm in this rotation, there's a book that comes out by Frederick Laboyer called Birth Without Violence. Oh, sorry about that. I'm going to turn this off so it doesn't do it again in about half a minute.
Yeah, I have that book on my shelves.
And I think Birth Without Violence came out, and Immaculate Deception by Suzanne Arms, just around the time. Okay, so I am reading about how when the baby is born and it cries, it's not crying just to breathe or turn pink. It's because it's kind of shocked by the bright lights and the cold air, and then being, at that time rubbed violently or even hung upside down and spanked. That's not done anymore, but there's a lot of things. All right, so we've got these two things kind of coinciding. There's an awakening going on two levels. And one day I watch a birth in the hospital that the woman had trained in Lamont. That was the only thing available at the time. But she had gotten through the whole labor without any medication, and she was really proud of herself. And the doctor said to her, "Little lady, this time you did it your way. Next time you'll do it mine." Yeah, my mouth also fell open, and her baby was taken from her and put into a plastic box, and was crying, and she was saying, "Can I hold my baby?" And they were saying no. And I went out in the hall, and I remember crying a little bit. I leaned up against the wall, and it was white sterile tile, and I was kind of crying a little bit, not just a little bit. And I just went, I'm making a vow. I'm going to spend the rest of my life bringing dignity to birth. I had no idea what that meant. I just said it. I'll never forget it either, because it was, I don't know what it was, kind of like this. And then shortly after that, I learned about midwifery. I learned about the first midwifery school in America, which was in Kentucky, and I applied. And a few years later, I went, and I was the youngest student they ever took. So that was how my journey began. With that, it was a very defining moment. You know how fate and destinies, the paths crossed, and all of a sudden, if all those things hadn't happened, I don't know what my life would have been. I just don't know.
And all the time that you were going through the nursing college and you were starting midwifery, were you also still drawing and writing? Was that creative side still there, or did you put it to one side for a while?
No, I always sketched, but I didn't paint until much later. But I was always sketching, and I journaled. Yes, I journaled and wrote extensive letters. Not really thinking too much about it. But in those days, midwifery school was very intense. So most of how I was writing was taking notes. But I was always reading other things other than midwifery, because I just want to know about everything. So I'm always reading something. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You had that wider context for society and culture.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you went into midwifery, and then can you explain sort of from that point how you came to do the work that you do now? If you want to say a little bit about what it is that you've crafted.
Well, it was quite by accident in a way. Again, I have to say, in all truth, it was fate and destiny. But here's what happened. I was a midwife, and I went into midwifery to become a home birth midwife. But before I could do that, I worked in a hospital for a year, and then a birth center for a year, and then I went into home birth. And I was never trained how to teach childbirth classes, and so the classes I was teaching at the time were something that were so informative. And I now joke, I could have given all of my parents a mini midwifery degree certificate. And I was wondering why they looked bored and were looking at their watches and never asked any questions. I couldn't understand what the problem was. Okay. So not too many years later, I became pregnant. And now another initiation began, but I didn't know that that's what it was. I was in a medical mindset about pregnancy and birth, even though I was a midwife. Well, I went through pregnancy, which was fine, and never had any kind of initiatory mentoring because everybody thought everything I needed to know, I knew as a midwife. And when I was in labor, I had awakening after awakening, shock after shock, betrayal after betrayal. And I was being shown that I knew nothing about giving birth as a mother from within. I only knew about birth from the outside, as management, as rational, as what should be happening, and is it happening, measuring it. And I went, right in the middle of labor, I'm realizing, what have I been doing? And one of these people were hating me in class. And there was one defining moment in my labor where things are going badly, and I've been in labor way too long, and I'm eating a strawberry in a tub of warm water. And I made another vow. I must make a lot of vows. You think, well, I was raised Catholic, so there you go. And I said, I will never lie to another pregnant woman. And then I ate the strawberry. This is a really funny thing, right? I didn't even know what it meant at the time. I just said it. And anyway, so as labor progressed or didn't progress, as the case may be, I went into the hospital and I had a cesarean. Now, this was my cesarean initiation it had a profound impact on me. And of course, I needed it. And I welcomed it, and I didn't welcome it at the same time, but I welcomed it because it was the only thing I could do. I wasn't going to survive if I didn't do it. But just before my baby was born, I had this Shakti moment that I talk a lot about because it was so mind-blowing. It shot through me, and I had a question that said, what is it you needed to know as a mother to give birth that you didn't know as a midwife? And I went, oh. And the next thing I knew, my baby cried. I was born, he was born, and we went on. Now, this question bubbled inside of me, even when I was going through postpartum adjustment, postpartum depression, nursing, and all that. It just kept stirring in me, and I couldn't let it go. I couldn't let me go. So I went on to get my master's degree for some reason, and it was sort of helpful in a way, but I was just looking for answers. How do women in other cultures birth? How do we do group classes? I mean, I just wanted to know all kinds of things that I didn't know about initiation. So I created my own degree program because there wasn't one like what I needed. Now, so from there, another accident happened. To get my master's, I had to do a thesis. And it was just another hurdle for me. I wasn't thinking much about it. I thought, oh, I like art. I'll find out what the drawings of pregnant women mean. Wink, wink, right? Right? So I invite 18 women, and they come and they draw 4 pictures in the first trimester and 4 pictures in their assignments in the third trimester. And then I call them afterwards to interview them. And as I'm doing this, and I'm watching what they draw and what they say, I'm not trying to interfere. I don't even know how to counsel or even use birth art. I'm just taking notes and recording what they say. And I'm like, something is happening here. And then afterwards, the drawings would sometimes have been predictive of what was going to happen to them in birth, or would have given meaning to what happened to them in birth, one or the other. There was a correlation. And I went, I think something just happened here. So I wrote my thesis up, and then I began to teach childbirth class in a brand new way. And I first started off by having parents play a kazoo, and they would sing Little Baby Beluga. So they would all have to learn a lullaby, because I wanted them to feel like parents and not like patients. And they loved it. And then, although I was nervous, the next series, I did a lullaby and birth art for the first time. And I asked them at the end, what was the most helpful thing about the series of 6-week classes? And they said the lullaby and the art. Nothing else mattered. And then I went on to add one new thing each time until I moved into teaching them a myth. And then that became the most important thing that they had learned. So that became birthing from within. But it took 8 years of those experiments. That was a long journey of trial and error and observing what happened. I didn't start off even meaning to do it.
Yeah, you didn't know where you were going. You found your way as you went along. And
I wanted to give them the experience I didn't have. I was trying to heal myself by giving the medicine away that I needed. And in so doing, I actually fell into something. It was really kind of crazy. But I loved it. It was the best decade of my life.
You said a few times that it was fate, but you listened. Sometimes I think these things come together, but people ignore it and don't want to engage with it. And when you were talking about, just before your baby being born, it was like you had a physical shudder that you did, like, not shudder, maybe that's not the right word, but it sounded quite visceral.
Oh, it was. It was a total. Yeah. It was crazy. It's hard to forget that. And actually, I thought afterwards, well, how can you be thinking that? But I didn't think it. It was a thought that came through me. So then birthing from within happened, and I began teaching people all over the country and in other countries. And then through that process, I gradually began to move into birth story work, because I realized that the biggest part of all childbirth preparation and healing from childbirth shock and disappointment, or even pride for that matter, that's a problem. It's all about story. It's not about actually what happened. It's what we tell ourselves about what happened, what it means about us. So that became the next journey that I'm still in. I'm still exploring that one.
Yeah, I was just thinking back to my academic research days where we talk about narrative reconstruction. So,
yeah.
You kind of make a story after the event to make sense of what happened. And
exactly.
And
then we have to remake the story sometimes.
Yeah. I was going to ask, so how do you think you went from that sort of shy, awkward girl who didn't feel like she really fit in to being this expansive storyteller? You've hinted, as you've gone, it's just like, it seems like life pulled you along to that path, but I wondered whether there was anything else you wanted to say.
I never, quote unquote, worked on it or did therapy on it. I just accepted that I was sort of an introvert reader, daydreamer. But I think it was how can I put this? I don't like the word passion, but it was becoming so absorbed in the intention to help stop suffering of all these women who also felt shocked and betrayed and confused by the way they were prepared or not prepared, or had nowhere to talk about what happened to them in a deep way. And I think that the joy it gave me to help people and to see that it was making a difference, and one by one, not necessarily in huge collective numbers, but it helped me open. Yeah.
Another question that I ask on this podcast is about cycles. And I'm wondering whether that's something that you see in your journey, whether it's, before being a midwife, sort of knowing about the female body and menstrual cycles, or life cycles, different stages of life, or circadian rhythms, whatever kind of cycle, is that something that has fed into how you've approached birth over the years?
That question, I was thinking about it, and I thought, oh dear. So if I was just to take menstruation as, let's say, as a cycle that one would notice as a woman throughout life, it may be my personality, or that I was raised at a time when women were just stoic and nobody really talked about it. You got on with it. So whether you had cramps or you were menstruating, you still did everything you were supposed to do. And there wasn't any red tent idea at all, nothing like it. So, and I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, because I don't know what the other experience would have been like. But the only time I did notice a cyclical event in my life related to being, menstruation cycles was during perimenopause. And this became very difficult because I had the migraine headaches related to hormonal shifts. And again, because of the stoicism of probably my personality or my generation or something, I don't really know. But I was already a teacher. I was going all over the country and in other countries to teach birthing from within and these ideas that I was excited about. And then, of course, I would be having a major migraine. But I couldn't say, oh, I'm sorry you've traveled so far and you've made reservations, but I'm going to have to go lie down and take care of my headache until tomorrow. I would have to teach right through the migraine, right through being nauseated, and nobody could know, because then they would want to take care of me instead of me serving them. And so this is when I really began to notice the cycles. And but what did I do about it or do with it? There was nothing I could do. I mean, or maybe there was, and I didn't think of it. But that was one thing when I read that question that I reflected on. But I'm not really a person who tunes into cycles that I think of, that I know of anyway.
I also, as you were speaking, I was wondering whether you made parallels between that experience of having the migraines during perimenopause and it being out of your control, and linking that to the birthing journey. And
most definitely. I mean, it's also as my Zen journey. I was a very serious Zen student for 10 years, and it was a life-changing practice for me in that I had an excellent teacher, and he would say, you sit every day pretty much the same place, same time, whether your Zendo's at home, if you will, in quotation marks, or here. And you do it whether you are sick or whether it is cold or whether you're tired or whether you're busy. You just stop and you sit. And that became so important to me. But this was, I guess I was a Zen student during the perimenopause. Yeah, I was. But that also influenced, it just influenced my whole life, that you arise in the activity that you are called to do the best you can. And if you really have to stop, I mean, when I actually finally got very, very sick I had a very serious kidney problem, then I got cancer, then I was actually forced to stop. I mean, but even then I wrote 2 books while I was in my deathbed. I thought it was going to be published after I died. So I still didn't stop, if you think about it. But on some level, I slowed down.
So when we, in our own lives, have these fateful moments where things come in and we have this opportunity to go in this new direction, we could put all sorts of barriers in the way and say, well, this has happened to me and this has happened. Or we can just grab that opportunity with both hands and see where it takes us and look forwards.
And the question here is, what makes one person have, I have, so I just want to say, I can understand how you pause in certain parts of your life. I got stuck for 10 years in a situation that I couldn't get out of. And then finally, when I got out of it, I said, oh, that's funny. This is a case of the gateless gate. I could have left at any time, but I thought I couldn't. I thought I wasn't ready. I thought I shouldn't. And I could have. So I can understand that. But the real question is, what comes together to make you do it in spite of obstacles, in spite of being shy or not having any money to do this big dream, or whatever obstacles there are? What makes some people go forward through the obstacles and some people do wait? Maybe while you're waiting at certain times of your life, you are building spiritual chi or getting more information or getting more confidence, so that when you do say yes, you're ready. So I don't really know how that works, but I do contemplate it a lot because I've done both.
You've already shared quite a few transformational moments with me. I wonder, it sounds like there are more. There are others that have put you in another direction. So there's another one that you could share with us.
Gosh, it's so funny. That's probably why so much my work is around transformation, because I seem to like relish this experience or something. Well, I'll have to think about that. But there was one more, I suppose. And it was a very significant one. When I had first left midwifery school, my friend and I went to Arizona and we met Louis Mel, who is now Louis Mel Madrona. And he was a family practice doctor at the time. Now he's a psychiatrist. But he was also involved in the Native American tradition. He's half Cherokee. And we went for a 3-day talk on what was called at that time holistic perinatal medicine or holistic perinatal care. Nowadays, the word holistic is not so in vogue, but in the late 70s, early 80s, it was. This was again, one of those moments that crossing his path changed the entire trajectory of my life. And many people have influenced my life or my thinking, but no one in the way that his 3 days did, because he had this understanding of seeing the world from the medicine wheel point of view, or a mandala. So now I make mandalas. I paint mandalas now. And I see my life as a mandala. But he was the first one to even show this to me. I had just come out of nurse-midwifery or midwifery school, we might call it nowadays. And it was still a good school, but didn't have spirituality in it or mythology or personal growth. It didn't have any of that in it, right? So here I go, and he shows us, and then he demonstrates how you can use philosophy in a prenatal interview, and how you can use your voice and suggestion versus commands to change a person's motivation and what they would be willing to do. Anyway, so I would say that sometimes it's a meeting of a person that can be powerfully transformational to you. But my friend who went with me, I'll say, do you remember when he said this? She doesn't remember it. So it didn't transform her life in the same way that it just blew my life and my future apart. So it's very personal.
That was just making me think of the book Women Who Run with Wolves, because we were talking about it in the women's circle that I host, and we all have a copy of it, and some people dove into it straight away. Other people, it's been sitting next to their beds for years and years and years, and they keep trying to pick it up and they just can't get into it, and they put it back down again, and you're ready for it at different times.
Exactly. Isn't that funny though? Yeah.
Is there something else that you would like to share, if you're thinking particularly of young people sort of who maybe haven't decided what exactly they want to do with their lives, or they're still working their way through school, and maybe they've got exam stress, and is there something that you can say from the journey that you've taken and those moments of fate and those twists and turns?
Well, The only thing I could say that would be close to making any sense is to do what you love and not what you should. And to do what you love, even if you're not getting support to do it, or nobody understands why you're doing it, even if it doesn't become financially rewarding or in any other way, it's difficult or something. I'd say that if you're on a soul path like this, this is what you're doing, then just do what you love and do it very well. Do it to the best of your ability and enjoy it.
Thank you for sharing your soul path with us. Where can people find out more about the work that you're doing?
Well, there are two places. One is birthstorymedicine.com, and that's where I'm trying to reach some parents, but also it's where the Birth Story School courses are. And I've just started another website. It's not quite done, but you can find it, Pam England Birth, which will be reaching more out to parents, and it will have blogs and things that will appeal to parents.
Oh, brilliant. I look forward to seeing that. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you so much. It's so nice to be with you again.
I really appreciate it.